When we were colonists, and all of this happened right here where we are, my God, we're in Valley Forge, of all wonderful places. When we were colonists and the king wanted to raise money from us, he and the parliament had ingenious ways of doing it. And one of the ways that they raised money was to enact the Stamp Act. And the Stamp Act required that every piece of paper in your possession, a book, a pamphlet, a lease, a deed, a mortgage, even a poster you were going to nail to a tree, had to have a stamp on it with the king's image. You think it was rough going to a post office? This was a foreign post office run by the king in the colonies, and you had to go there and get these stamps. Question: how did the king know that his image was on every piece of paper in your possession? Answer: the Parliament enacted something called the Writs of Assistance Act. This horrible piece of legislation authorized British soldiers to write their own search warrants. So a British soldier would show up at your door in New York or New Jersey or Pennsylvania or Delaware and handwrite out authority which authorized him to enter your house, ostensibly to look for the stamps. There was no judge involved. There was no evidence that you didn't have the stamps. There was no evidence that you had any documents that required the stamps. He was just permitted to enter, and while there, take what he wanted. Rum from the islands without a tax stamp, you can't prove you paid the tax on it, we're going to confiscate it. Furniture from the mother country, you can't prove you paid a tariff on it, we're going to confiscate it. By the way, we have 15 soldiers that need a good hot meal and a place to stay tonight. We're taking over your farmhouse. Enough was enough. We fought a revolution. We won the revolution. We wrote a constitution. And the whole purpose of the Constitution was to keep the government off the people's backs. The only reason the Constitution was enacted was because of the promise that the Bill of Rights would be part of it. So it is enacted, it is debated in 87, it's enacted in 89, and in 91 the Bill of Rights is added. And the Bill of Rights enumerates the liberties that we believe are ours by our birthright. When the Constitution was being debated not far from here in Philadelphia, there was a great argument about the origin of our freedoms. Question: where do our freedoms come from? Answer, if the person answering is Thomas Jefferson, from our humanity. God created us in His image and likeness, and as He is perfectly free, so too are we perfectly free. And when Jefferson wrote in the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and that among these is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, he answered that question for all time. Our freedom comes from our humanity. This belief is known as the natural law, that our freedoms are as natural to us as the fingers on the ends of our hands, the noses in the middle of our faces, or any part of our body or any part of our spirit. The first piece of legislation ever enacted by the Congress of the United States was to adopt the Declaration of Independence. And the Declaration of Independence, just as they signed it, just as they promulgated it on July 4th, 1776, is part of the law of the land. And so if anybody says to you, well, what do you do when the government violates our natural rights? You do what the law of the United States says you do. It is the duty of the people to alter or abolish a government that violates our rights. And so we wrote a Constitution, and the Constitution, because of the Bill of Rights, added specific guarantees of natural rights that the government couldn't interfere with. The right to think as you want, the right to say what you think, the right to develop your own personality. I've frequently told O'Reilly that's the right he should be most grateful for. The right to publish what you say, the right to worship as you want, the right not to worship if you don't want, the right to self-defense, the right to use a gun when the police are unwilling or unable to protect you, and the right to use that gun on the government if it steals our freedoms, if it's taken over by a tyrant. The most unique of American rights is articulated in the Fourth Amendment. And after the right to life, it is the greatest of rights. It is the right to be left alone. We call it the right to privacy. And it reversed the Writs of Assistance Act. And it said if the government has a target, someone from whom they want evidence, no matter how guilty is the target, no matter how widespread is the belief in the guilt of the target, no matter how accurate is the belief in the guilt of the target, when the government wants to get in your property or in your home or into your bank account or into your papers, it must go to a neutral judge. And it must present to that judge what the Constitution calls and what lawyers know as probable cause, evidence under oath that it is more likely than not that the target or the custodian of these papers possesses evidence of a crime. That was the law of the land in the United States of America until it slowly began being worn away in the lifetime of everyone in this room. Let's get this straight. The right to privacy, this unique American right, required that everyone from the government that wanted anything from a private person had to go to a neutral judge and swear an oath and present evidence to that judge as to why the person's right to privacy should be violated. Now, we all know what happened on 9/11. And many of you live right here. Shanksville, Pennsylvania, Washington, D.C., Lower Manhattan. None of those is more than a day's ride from here. Many of you probably know victims of 9/11. I did. A lot of us at Fox did. I happened to have been in New Jersey the morning when it happened, and we all have horrific memories, and it was one of the darkest days in American history. But my friends, assaults by fanatics on our safety does not justify assaults by the government on our freedom. The Bush administration went to the Congress and said we have to have the Patriot Act. And we need it right now because the terrorists are under every bedpost and behind every toilet and inside every refrigerator. And if we don't have these powers, we will not be kept safe. And so the Patriot Act, which is 315 pages long, which basically amends hundreds and hundreds of other statutes. So in order to read the Patriot Act, you not only need the Act itself in front of you, you need the entire United States Code, which is about the size of 8 or 10 sets of Encyclopedia Britannica. I've read it 3 times, and it takes about 20 hours to read each time. The Patriot Act was posted on the House intranet, the internal internet, to which only members of the House of Representatives and their senior staff have access, for 15 minutes before the vote. There was no debate on the floor of the House, and the Patriot Act was enacted.